Wylie, Texas. Summer of 1980. A seemingly tranquil town where families lived their lives, children played in the streets, and a sense of community made everyone feel safe. At that time, Wylie was the perfect place to raise a family. Among these families were the Gores and the Montgomerys, two lives that would intersect in a brutal and unexpected way. Betty Gore, 30 years old, was a dedicated teacher and a loving mother. Married to Alan Gore, a reserved man, they seemed to embody the typical suburban couple. Life was mundane and routine, but appearances can be deceiving. Betty's loneliness grew with each passing day. Alan was often away on business trips, leaving Betty to manage the household and the kids on her own. This solitary existence slowly consumed her. On the other hand, there was Candy Montgomery, the vibrant neighbor brimming with energy. Married to Pat Montgomery and mother to 2 children, Candy seemed to be in constant motion, involved in church events, social activities, and the life of the party at every gathering. She had what Betty yearned for most, an active, stimulating life filled with friends and fun. Despite their differences, the 2 women became close friends. They met at church, and before long, a friendship blossomed. Candy was the opposite of Betty in many ways. Where Betty was introspective and insecure, Candy was extroverted and confident. For Betty, this friendship was an escape from her monotonous routine. For Candy, it was perhaps just another one of her countless social connections. However, as their friendship grew, an invisible current of tension began to form. Wylie was not a place known for great scandals, but what was about to unfold would forever change that reputation. One seemingly ordinary night during a church event, Candy and Alan struck up a casual conversation. Perhaps it was Candy's smile or the way she listened so attentively, but something in that interaction caught Alan's eye. The flirtation, initially innocent, soon escalated into something more. Thus, a dangerous attraction was born. Alan, feeling neglected at home, found in Candy the excitement his marriage was lacking. Betty, after the births of their daughters, had become increasingly distant and emotionally unstable, leaving Alan longing for a connection that made him feel alive again. Candy, on the other hand, saw in Alan a way to escape the monotony of her domestic life. What began as innocent conversations soon transformed into secret meetings in distant motels, away from the watchful eyes of their small town. They orchestrated their encounters with precision. Specific times, excuses for their respective spouses, everything meticulously planned to avoid suspicion. To their neighbors, they appeared to be nothing more than good friends and devoted parents. But the truth behind that facade was much darker. Months passed, and like any secret, the pressure began to mount. Alan, consumed by guilt, started to question his choices. The weight of betrayal became too heavy to bear. He knew he was not just betraying Betty but also their daughters. Although Candy brought the thrill he craved, the emotional toll was too high. In June 1980, Alan decided it was time to end the affair. He met with Candy and told her he could not continue. The affair had served its purpose, distracting him from his monotonous life and making him feel alive once more. But now, the emotional cost was too great. Candy, however, did not take the news well. She had become deeply involved with Alan, and the thought of losing that connection shook her to her core. What happened next would turn out to be one of the most brutal murders Wylie had ever seen. On the morning of June 13, 1980, Alan was away on a business trip. As usual, he called home that evening to speak with Betty, but she did not answer. Initially, he was not concerned. Perhaps she was busy with the kids or simply did not hear the phone. However, when he tried to call again the next morning and still could not reach his wife, anxiety began to creep in. Desperate, Alan asked a neighbor to check on her. What he found when he entered that house would change all their lives forever. Betty Gore was dead, brutally murdered. Her body lay covered in blood, and next to her was a bloody axe, the weapon of the crime. The crime scene was one of sheer brutality. 41 axe blows, 28 of which struck her in the head. The savagery of the attack indicated deep personal rage. The killer clearly wanted Betty dead, and in the most savage way possible. Wylie police quickly began their investigation, and Alan was the first to be interrogated. After all, in many homicide cases, the spouse is often the prime suspect. However, Alan had a solid alibi. He was out of town on business, and his colleagues confirmed this. Without other leads, the police began to widen their investigation, looking into Betty and Alan's inner circle. Candy Montgomery, Betty's best friend, soon drew the attention of the police. Initially, no one could fathom that Candy could be involved. She appeared devastated by Betty's death, weeping during interviews and offering help to the family. However, as investigators dug deeper, they began to notice inconsistencies in her story. During one of her interviews, Candy was confronted with a question she had been dreading. "Did you have an affair with Alan Gore?" The question hung in the air, and eventually, the truth began to surface. Candy admitted to the affair but denied any involvement in Betty's murder. She claimed she had gone to Betty's house that morning to pick up something for one of the kids, and the 2 women ended up arguing about the affair. According to Candy, Betty attacked her with the axe, and she acted only in self-defense. The police, however, were not convinced. The brutality of the crime, 41 blows did not fit the narrative of mere self-defense. Yet, it was Candy's word against the physical evidence. She was arrested and charged with murder, and the case quickly became a media spectacle. Candy Montgomery's trial began months later, and tensions were high. The community was divided. On one side were those who believed Candy was guilty, a woman motivated by anger and jealousy who murdered her friend in a fit of rage. On the other side were those who believed in Candy's claim of self-defense, viewing her as a victim of circumstance. Throughout the trial, Candy's defense painted a disturbing picture of Betty. They described her as an emotionally unstable woman prone to violent outbursts, particularly after discovering her husband's affair. The defense argued that Betty had attacked Candy with the axe, and Candy had acted merely to defend herself. The prosecution, on the other hand, painted a completely different picture. They argued that Candy had planned the murder, motivated by the fear that Betty would expose her affair with Alan. The prosecution highlighted the brutality of the attack, asserting that no one who was merely defending themselves would deliver 41 blows. After days of dramatic testimonies and conflicting evidence, the jury reached a verdict that would shock everyone. Candy Montgomery was acquitted of murder charges. The jury, based on the claims of self-defense, decided that the crime was not premeditated. Candy was released, and the town of Wylie was never the same.